Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Brightworks. I had to check out this replay today because, well, I noticed something a bit cheeky about it. Typically, and I hope this doesn't upset anybody when I say this, whenever I see a replay, I tend to notice that the length of the replay tends to follow the average skill of the players, or the average rating of the players anyways. Usually the lower true skill matches do tend to be a little bit longer. Now that's no problem, of course. You get to see that epic late game, but also it means that sometimes there's a lot of stalling about. However, this match, which is played on All That Glitters, has got to be one of the most interesting ones currently in my inbox. It's a shorter game on All That Glitters, which, by the way, is if any map in the current map pool that I think of as should be usually going a pretty long distance, it's this one. And this turned out to be a little bit of a shorter match. Now, I did notice in the chat here, Lacopa, our blue team leader spawning on the southern side here, proposed to his teams that he go for a tank rush at a certain timing, try and fit out a bunch of tanks and then push through, try and break the ranks here. And then I noticed that Torch on the other side of the map, up north here, spawning next to the red team leader Neutralis, said, all right, what should we do to prepare for the tank rush? Actually, I think I can show you here. Yeah, here we are. So Lacopa says, let's do a tank rush at 8 minutes. And then Torch says, almost immediately after, now these are in team chats, right? So they don't know about each other saying this. And Torch says, so how are we going to prepare for the 8-minute tank rush? I just thought that was too funny. I wanted to really highlight that real quick. In case that's what we're going to be going for. I think that's probably an interesting strategy, and it could definitely explain how this match ends up being so short. Now, All That Glitters, I mean, what is there to say? We all are very familiar with All That Glitters. There's a lot of these golden rocks lying around all over the place, as well as these little golden mineral patches. There are some valuable mineral patches. There are 3.2s accompanying the 1.8s. There's a couple here, and then they generally trend across the middle of the map right here, sort of the midline, as it's helpfully highlighted here by Michidutsa. And it's definitely a race to see who can claim all of their metal extractors first, and then apply more pressure to claim more metal extractors. That's going to give you a huge value, is claiming territory rather than claiming any specific spot. Both teams ought to have an air player. There's pretty much a well-defined air spot here. It's this backline player where we see Polypoid is going to be playing, and on the red team, it's going to be Unsober Meerkat. I quite like that name. Oh, going for 3 wide wind turbine fans. However, though, yeah, that is not what we want to do. We definitely want to do 2x2 here, so that they don't chain react off each other. Makes you just a little bit more resistant to bombing. Yeah, Polypoid saying they might tank rush. Everybody's thinking about tank rushes. Apparently, that's becoming a bit of a thing here, or at least it was in this lobby. I've noticed it's a bit of a chain reaction, right? You tend to one team will tank rush, and then the next game, everyone will prepare for a tank rush. And usually no one will tank rush because everyone was preparing for a tank rush. And then the game after that, everyone will tank rush again. So it's like a sine wave. It's just constantly oscillating back and forth of people tank rushing and not tank rushing, all that good stuff. Apox has done a great job of pushing forward here and claiming his metal extractors. I'd love to see him sending a construction bot over in this direction to claim all these ones as well. Wrong 48 in a little bit of trouble here, as a couple of rovers have snuck on past his defenses and start blowing up his hard-earned metal extractors. He does have some blitzes out to try and contest this, but the rovers are a little bit faster than the blitzes. If he micros it properly, he could probably get quite a few of them here, though. Takes 4 of them down, but there is still one pest in the backline. Yeah, he's trying to mop this up, but this rover is getting an excellent scout out. At this point, the red team also has a decent view of exactly what's going on over here. You can see this rover got an excellent look around the back line of the blue team. Always very valuable. A quick tank tried to push through, but those shuriken were pumped out by the red team air player. That's very nice. One key reason to go for Cortex Air in the early game is the fact that you get those shuriken, which are very, very powerful. You also, of course, can build that Cortex Economy, which is just a little bit cheaper. Makes it a little bit easier to get into a nice position there. Apox is really holding his line up here. I really love the posturing on these. Can these reach the... yeah, they can just about barely reach the metal extractors over here. I don't know if yeah, they kind of have to be centered. So yeah, these can probably shut down and deny the metal extractors coming up for the red team. So that's really, really nice posturing here on Apox's behalf. Gonna have his work cut out for him here, and yeah, I think we really need to claim all these metal extractors here. That could be a that could be just an extra, oh, I don't know, 8 or so metal flowing back into Apox's pockets as we speak. Already he has the economy to start doing full on, whoa, a little bit of stuttering there. Had a computer reset today that failed apparently, and had to do a little bit of a manual backup. So hopefully everything sounds okay, looks okay. Always technical details on this channel. Looks like we are abandoning the tank rush as 2 players in the backline are simultaneously going for a T2 bot lab. Interesting. Mushidutsa and Lakopa both going for that T2 bot lab here. Interesting to see because, well, I would expect that one of them would go for T2 and the rest of the players would just settle in and wait for their T2 shipment to arrive. But that's not the case here. Missile trucks out here on the front lines, accompanied by some of those artillery. That's quite nice. The artillery is a great inclusion here because you can do that big spike of damage, which is usually what you need to shut down any laser towers or things like that. However, the Whistler gives you the vision because these shell shockers don't have hardly any vision at all. And so it's quite nice to see those two mixed together in composition. Definitely the right move here. I talk a lot about when you're making compositions of units, what you want to focus on is not so much the units individually, but the utilities that the composition comes with. So, for instance, you know, what kind of long-ranged firepower do you have? Do you have any sort of siege options like shell shockers or something like that? Do you have swarm control, like for instance a Pounder here or a Janus or something like that? Do you have you know, big spikes of damage, all that good stuff? Important to think about when you're building up these compositions. It's a delicate dance. You go a little too hard into one realm or another. You invest all the way into Blitz, and then 2 Januses melt away your entire army in one click. You go all the way into Januses, you just get outranged, or they just bait out your shots and then jump on top of you with cheap units. So there's always weaknesses. It's always trade-offs, right? And so you have to build around that, which is, I mean, one of the lovely things about this game, but also one of the most difficult things about this game. Okay. Looks like we're not going for a tank rush. I think if we were going for a tank rush, we would see way more production here coming out of the backline. Lakopa did finish up his T2 bot lab. Looks like Michidutsa is not going to. He's a long ways out from finishing up this T2 lab. I'm not sure exactly what the plan is here. Either sacrifice the commander or eat up some of these solar panels or something. Somehow you have to get the metal to fund that. Oh, Lakopa accidentally handing off his transport there. Unfortunate. Oh, I think we could have killed that shell shocker. Engagement here is hard to push into with bots. It's kind of depressing to go into bots and then watch them all melt away from that tank fire there. But yeah, those tanks are very, very sturdy, and pushing in there with bots is not really going to work all too well. Shell shockers also contributing a nice amount of firepower in the back, just a little bit of auxiliary support firepower. Tank's really gumming up this passageway though, and that's it could be an advantage, it could be a disadvantage, depends on what both of these players want to do. I think right now it's actually serving as an advantage here for Winter Fenris, StarCraft 2. Must be a StarCraft 2 player. I think it's definitely an advantage. Now that's quite nice, moving this constructor forward, but it will go down, and at the end of the day, it is the end of the day. Yellow is backline, but still producing units, so that's nice to see. A little bit of a run by here. These tanks have stalled on APM at the moment, but I think they could push forward and get a little bit more work done. There they go. Auxiliary processing systems do kick back into high gear, and they will start to waddle their way forwards into the back lines of the purple player as well as the blue player. Very annoying. Medium tanks don't die very easily, and yeah, this laser tower is having a hard time cleaning them up. At this point, commander is basically the best option. These windmills are going to chain react, as is the case with any 3-wide windmill farm. That's why we build them 2 wide, just in case you're curious, just for that reason right there. Lakopa losing about half his energy production just with a single chain reaction, which is, you know, quite unfortunate. Big tank push coming through on the right-hand side here. I don't know how on earth Winter is going to hold this aside from using the commander, which should have honestly been pushed pretty far forward here already. These tanks realized that. They saw that there was no commander holding the choke point here and just swept on through without a care. This is going to hurt a lot, especially if the backline doesn't get into this fight immediately. We need to see some Janus production or something coming out of Gorilla X. Sorry, Gorillo X. Front lines are holding decently. Heavy laser turret to burst through the armor on those brutes there. It's a decent option, but it's fairly slow, which is a problem. You have to be very, very aware of that. Meanwhile, these brutes on the right-hand side have completely shut down Fenris's base here. He does have a beamer turret up, so that's quite nice. Going to start whittling down those brutes, but very slowly, in fact. And it looks like Fenris is now not part of the game. He's tapped out of the game, in other words. Yeah, decided to just hand over all of his units to, well, nobody. Lakopa did take after a little while. Unfortunate to leave that soon into the match, especially on the weaker lane here. Gorillo X now has his work cut out for him. He's going to have to start producing those T2 units immediately if he wants any chance of holding this line. Whoa, big commander explosion in the center of the map right here. Looks like that's going to be wrong 48's commander going down there. Meanwhile, another batch of tanks is coming through. Kako 78 could just D-gun all those down, as Lakopa pointed out, but instead he's going to walk away. He is a walking man after all. Gunslingers are quite nice against medium tanks, though. They do a decent amount of damage. They actually do a tremendous amount of damage. And, of course, they repair themselves. So if they survive the engagement, then you've got a fresh batch of tanks ready for battle once more here. Nice little D-gun from Apox there, trying to keep the commander alive. I think he should have gone for another D-gun there to try and cement it. Lakopa trying his very best to build up some sort of defensive line here, but having a really hard time. Inheriting a commander is never fun. Unless it's at the start of the game. Meanwhile, by the way, Apox's commander did go down. These tanks are looking brutal. Lakopa's going to have to deal with this with the commander. That's the only unit he has. These bulls are going to try and wrap around and focus the fire into this choke point. It's a good move. They're a little out of position, though, and so they're going to be kind of playing catch-up here. And you can see they start firing on these tanks pretty inaccurately. Now, they do a lot of damage, so they can definitely clean these up. Gorillo is using the bulls here to force the tanks into the commander's D-gunning range. Excellent D-guns there, wiping out tons of those tanks. The Lakopa commander, secondary commander, also pushing in here, and that is going to be an excellent amount of those tanks cleaned up. Now, the thing is not done here. These bulls are having a little bit of a hard time trying to figure out where they should go. Difficult to manage, and of course Lakopa is managing an entire different army on the other side of the map here, trying to micro a bunch of Sheldons and radar bots and all that good stuff on this side of the map, while also dealing with an incursion on the right-hand side. So very, very difficult to deal with that. Nice bit of air coming out from all the, well, both air players, really. We've got fighters in the mix here. A couple of bombers were brought out, and they will be shot down. But interestingly, you can kind of use those bombers as bait to pull in fighters. And that is unfortunate. A whole lot of fighters did just go down there for the Lavender player here, using these T1 gunships to shut down tanks. You can see they're fairly inaccurate. They need almost the same change that the Roughneck got a little while ago. Made their projectiles a little bit quicker. That way they just hit their targets a little more consistently, I would say. And there come the fighters to shut down a lot of those, a lot of those gunships there. Essentially the entire reason why those gunships are very hardly ever built. And Gunslinger's causing quite a bit of problem over here. You can see they rank up very quickly, and especially taking down a commander. That one's going to be a 3 chevron hero. As now this lane is re-won again. Suddenly the blue team has tons and tons of forces holding the line on this left-hand side of the map here. Tanks are going to have a really hard time pushing into these gunslingers. They're essentially choice built to deal with tanks, so they're very, very accustomed to this fight. Eventually, these gunslingers will be able to will be shut down, rather. There's just too many tanks for them to handle. But doing a great job of stalling out this army and getting a phenomenal trade nonetheless. Down go the gunslingers. They can, of course, be resurrected if we get a T1 resbot out here. Looks like Kako already has the T1 lab still, so could be worth investing in a couple of those resbots to either reclaim all this metal or, at the very least, pick up resurrect some of these units, I mean. Just good old T1 tanks, though, making the rounds. A couple of brutes that are fairly healthy. Continuing into the backline here. Laser towers up to try and thwart the efforts of some of these, again, T1 medium tanks trying to push through. Where's that Scorpion battery? I hear it firing. Oh, it's over here. Killing ticks. Feels like a bit of a waste for those expensive Scorpion batteries, but gotta do what you gotta do, I suppose. Gorilla X is going for a fusion reactor, so he's desperately low on power at the moment. A couple of medium tanks continuing to roll through. He's got a bunch of open lanes right here. The red team is exposing this lane and trying to poke through in this direction. For what it's worth, Neutralis has done an excellent job of breaking his line and then using that broken line in order to squeeze units through. And now Apox's main command center is under a little bit of fire. Now a bunch of T1 solar panels are going to go down, which is great. Those are a excellent choice as far as targets go. You should definitely kill them first. They're a sin upon the world. And definitely this late into the game, we shouldn't be building this many of them. Yeah, 1,500 metal plus, you know, however much was tied up in these ones over here. Definitely way too much for at this point in the game. They should be reclaimed, turned into either advanced solar panels or just go for T2 and try and get some of those fusion reactors up. Gunslingers shut down those tanks lickety split though, and that will be all she wrote as far as that aggression goes. Save for a single pounder who's going to try and make his way into the backlines here. That's our hero right there. Yep, Scorpion battery's pretty powerful. They do a lot of damage to anything with armor on it, including these tanks, including T3. They're just a extremely, extremely powerful turret option. Pounder here, getting swarmed. Sort of what they're designed to counter. However, they just, you know, they can only counter so much. At this point, Fiends are starting to ravage the northern side of the map here. Looks like the pink player, Richard Blunt, did go for that T2 lab here. Did not have the resources for it, though. Should have got those T2 metal extractors up first before going for the lab. Now he has no units to speak of, as well as no metal whatsoever. Fiends are encroaching on that base extremely quickly. They're actually not going to push onto that base. They're going to go into the backline here. There is a Tsar. That's a decent counter here. The Tsar's heavy projectile does a massive AoE, so it could certainly do a little bit of damage to these Fiends. Shurikens here, also not bad. Boom, there goes the Tsar shot, firing into these T2 units, wiping away the majority of them. Shuriken easily paralyzing the rest, and this run-by was able to be thwarted with minimal effort. Very, very nicely done. A bunch of Mauser under fire as well from Sheldon. Mauser, of course, can't turn their little snozzle 180 degrees behind them. They can, they've got like a... Well, I guess they can't turn it... Yeah, they can't turn 180 degrees behind them. They've got a 180 field of view from left to right, but they can't aim behind themselves, so they have a really hard time retreating. That's why you need some sort of unit to cover for them if they're going to back off. Twitcher's here building us. Oh, okay. I thought he was building a spy bot. It looked like the looks like the Cortex Spybot for a second there. No, it's just a T1 constructor here. Not sure what we're going to use that for, but you could always build those and use them to build mexes or whatever on the front lines. They're fairly disposable at this point in the game. Vanisher is pretty good against gunslingers. Definitely one of those more effective counters here. Lavender fighters have shot down the majority of the brown fighters here. He does have the T2 lab, but he's not going for those T2 fighters, interestingly enough. Unsober Meerkat, that is. Wondering why we're not making that sort of tech transition here. The T2 fighters are significantly better than any of the T1 fighters, so I'm not sure why the stalling on going up to that new tech level here. Bulls taking a fight against the Tigers. The Bulls will win this fight every time. However, the Tigers are a lot easier to replace, so... The Tigers should have numbers advantage, but they did not in this case. Gunslinger's much better against the T1 tanks than the T2 tanks. You can see that Tiger rather stood up pretty well against the Gunslinger, which, you know, makes sense. It's T1 versus T2. It's essentially how it's supposed to go. Looks like a T1 vehicle bay was built here. Tsar will go down. Shuriken have been rerouted in this direction. Flak turret has been built to shut down those shuriken. It's a little bit of overkill, but I guess I don't mind it, especially if maybe bombers or gunships or something like that did make their way down south there to cause a little bit of a problem. Neutralis is not pushing in on his lane, not nearly as hard as he should anyways. He's gone up to T2. He has the T2 constructor out, and he's going to start building an anti-nuke. Always important to remember that. Do we have any nuclear arms coming up at the moment? Doesn't look like it, at least not for what I can see. It's a really difficult line to push into here, especially with T1. T1's going to melt away pretty quick. What I'd love to see is also some lightning turrets thrown in the mix here. Those can pop up and do a ton of AoE damage. AoE, quote-unquote AoE damage. Let me know down below how you feel about lightning damage. Is lightning damage or chain reaction damage? Is that AoE, or is that its own category? It's a little different than AoE, but it still functionally does the same thing. So it's a unique property. Big push through the middle of the map here. Commander does go down. That was D-gunning down all those tanks. It's very annoying. It's good to have that off the field. I almost called it Pyros. The Fiends are marching their way through as well, but those Shuriken are continuing to be a pain in the neck. Need to see either the fighters move forward or maybe even send some missile ships forward or something like that. Missile trucks, rather. Bombers targeting... What are these bombers targeting? I guess the anti-air tower there? A bit odd. A bit of an odd targeting for those bombers there, but not the end of the world. Yeah, okay. Looks like Polypoid is going to go into a T2 air. I was going to say that I think it's about time. It looks like he agrees, because he's going to start going into T2 as well. We have a Tsar over here starting to whittle down some of these light defenses. And by whittle, I guess I mean blast. Whittling would be, I guess the towers are whittling down the Tsar. The Tsar is just earth-shakingly powerful. Massive metal field here. Yeah, we definitely need to reclaim. You can see the Twitcher's doing a good job of it. They're reclaiming a ton of metal. You can see when all of them are reclaiming, it's up to about 100 or so metal per second coming into the economy of Lacopa, who's just fuddling more and more bots onto the front line here. Actually, it looks like we don't have enough build power at the moment. Yeah, it looks like we might do with a little bit more build power in the backline. Meanwhile, it's a mystery why none of the units have pushed through this right-hand side here. I mean, this is very dangerous, but a single missile truck will essentially tear all this down. One missile truck, one spy truck, or a spy bot, or something like that. Actually, I just realized Cortex doesn't have a spy vehicle, do they? No, they do not. Okay, interesting. I don't know why, but somehow that just now occurred to me. Yeah, Armada, of course, has the Gremlin, which is a stealth tank, but the Cortex does not have any such armament in their capabilities. They are just, I guess they just send out a tremor and hope that it can dumbfire into the correct area. It's called volume of fire, and it's the age-old Orcish technique of filling an entire volume with bullets and sending that volume towards your enemy. Fairly effective, I would say. Bulls here firing in unison, and it's a pretty devastating hit whenever they land. One of those things about this game being real-time simulated is the fact that there's a little bit of randomness injected into essentially every shot in the game, which is one of the reasons why I think it's so refreshing to play this game after playing StarCraft for so long. Because in StarCraft, there's not really any randomness. Like, the randomness is what your spawn location is, whether you're, if you're Terran, it's where you spawn, and whether your add-ons will be on the outside or inside of your base. For this game, randomness essentially permeates down to the very bones of every engagement, which I think is a little bit more interesting. It makes for a more dynamic battle situation, and it also means it's a lot harder to gauge what is an effective fight and what isn't. You can gauge based on what the capabilities of your composition are and whether those abilities match up or defeat a enemy's abilities, but you can't really gauge, how many shots will land and how much damage per second comes out of this army. All that sort of stuff is very, very difficult to calculate. Sometimes I worry about comparing this game to StarCraft, because it really is nothing like StarCraft. It's just the biggest RTS that I can compare it to, so I know the widest audience of people will be aware of StarCraft and at the very least have some semblance of what I'm talking about, even if you're not a fan. I sure am a fan. I'm a real fan of StarCraft. I feel like it's one of those games that you could effectively call a sport, just because of how fast those players are moving. Like if you watch, you know, Cyril or Bjorn or like, you know, any top level StarCraft player, and you watch how fast they're moving. If they were doing that in any other sport, they would be considered a world champion. Like they would be like, if they were moving that fast and they were running 100 meters, they would set new records. Anyways, Tremor is brought out here on the front line. Tremor's a little bit of a meme right now. It's got some quirk to it. You always want to set this guy to dumb firing mode. You really don't want to have him firing on his own because his splash radius is gargantuan, and wherever he's firing, you know for certain that if it's not where you're telling him to fire, he may as well just be firing on your own army. Tremor's gonna rain down those artillery shells. Those artillery shells also have impulse to them, which is quite nice. That impulse can do quite a lot of damage. These are just dumb firing. I was wondering what they were doing. They didn't seem like they were firing in the right location there. It's because they weren't. They were dumb firing just forward, which is pretty funny. He was trying to set up like a concave of flame to prevent any units from coming out of there, which is a image that I quite like, but unfortunately a little bit ineffective. Mammoth to accompany the Tremor here. Not a bad idea. Those mammoths have a tremendous range and do a huge amount of damage. Of course, incredibly slow for the you know, what you get out of it. So it's well worthwhile. But here it is. All right, the red player has finally collapsed on this side. I wonder when this was going to happen. Decided to build up a T2 force. Well, I guess it's technically a mixed force. This is the lone T1 medium tank here, soaking up all these laser shots. But the medium tank will go down, and now it's time for these heavy assault tanks to show their teeth. Tigers are going to get into the backline here. Now, the economy is not very exposed, and there are tons of bulls making their way in this direction to clean up this incursion. However, these units have already made it very deep into the back lines. Tiger tanks just gumming up everything that they can get their snozzles on. And there we go. Eventually they will be cleaned up, but that is a lot of destruction they rampage through here. Shutting down some advanced metal extractors, shutting down half a base. A resign vote was called, but I don't really think that's necessary. This does not really seem like that close of a match here. Or rather, it doesn't seem like it's close to ending. Rather, it is a close match. I couldn't tell you who's going to win this one. The left-hand side has sort of collapsed. The right-hand side has sort of collapsed, which is expected on all that glitters. Usually we see this player push in here and this player push in here, and whichever team can hold the best will win. There's a scuttle, by the way, lurking here. Oh, it's like a James Bond movie where the laser beams are like slowly approaching. Now has come the time, Mr. Bond. Anyways. Is that lightning chain reacting to friendly buildings? Well, that's interesting. Oh, well, I would definitely call lightning AoE then if it chain reacts to friendly structures as well. Interesting. Stormbringers, I'll be honest, they're pretty bad. Yeah, they kind of suck. They're a very good unit for something like this, where you need to disperse a massive amount of area of bombs. Oh, Nuke is up, by the way. By Athetos. Athetos. Where's it headed? Oh, interesting. Right on the front line here, wipes out a large portion of the armies from both of these teams. Kind of opening the gates there. And the flood begins. I see. So the plan was to nuke the front lines to clear away the armies and then send in the swarm. Very nicely done. Good coordination there. It's usually very hard to coordinate the team to do that, but that is a game winner right there for sure. You see that now all of the armies have collapsed. Those tentatively held front lines are now being pushed in rapidly. Not enough snipers here to shut down this many tanks, and eventually this red army will continue to collapse forward. T1 walls will just go underfoot for these T2 tanks. They do not care about those T1 walls whatsoever. Shurikens here, shutting down whenever they can as well, making it just a little bit easier to push in here, getting some more slightly more efficient trades rather. And yeah, this is a really excellently coordinated push. Watch this replay, team, and vote yes. Couldn't agree more. Down with the T1 solar panels. An era has come to an end. The Tiger tank is very powerful, just in the amount of numbers that it can field at any given point. Very nicely done. Excellent coordination there from the red team, getting that nuke off to wipe away the army and then sending in a huge wave of units when the army was diminished. That is absolutely what we love to see. Very nicely done. Naturalis winning the Golden Cow Award. Excellently done. Yep, you can see the eco scaling here for the red team was just a little bit better. You can see two of the red players on top, followed by a blue, followed by a red, followed by a red, followed by a blue. So, red team overall just had a significant economic advantage, and I think that's really where the story was told. Excellent gameplay, excellent strategy. Really love to see it. Turns out the 8-minute tank rush is surpassed by the 28-minute nuke rush, or tank rush rather. Can't wait to see more of that. I hope you enjoyed today, and I will see you in the very next video.